December of 2008. And it was the time of year when downtown Visalia, as it normally does each year, was offering horse-drawn carriage rides across Main Street, down Main Street and around downtown. William, our son, was a baby. He was about 5 months old at the time, and he's no longer 5 months old, but I can tell stories about him when he was 5 months old. When he was 5 months old, we thought that this would be a great, fun experience for our family. You know, it's a sensory experience, lots of lights and sounds of things, and you could meet a horse for real, and it would be a great opportunity for us. So we decided that we would go down for the horse-drawn carriage ride downtown. It was a colder year than most years in December, certainly than the last couple years. It was cold enough that we realized we need to make sure that we're warm enough. So we had no trouble, though, grabbing a blanket, because we were blessed with enough blankets when William was born to probably keep an entire school of babies warm. Some of you and others made and purchased blankets that we really enjoyed using to keep William and Madeline warm as they were babies. So we had no trouble finding one. One of the things that Kim helped us do was always remember that each one of these blankets has a story. And each one of these blankets was given by somebody and often made by somebody. So she was always the one who helped us remember who made which blanket, what the story was, or what kind of personality is coming through in this blanket that happens to be wrapped around our child at the time. We grabbed one blanket that was one of our favorites that happened to be made by Kim's sister and her family. And it was one we used all the time, and it was one of the softest blankets that we had. We grabbed that, and we went on our way downtown. We found the carriage that was waiting in front of Bank of the Sierra, and we climbed aboard and we rode around downtown and back, and we still thought, wow, it's early enough, so we have a little time. So we decided to take a walk. So we put William in the stroller, and we walked down Main Street a couple blocks, turned around and walked back, and realized, well, that's probably time to go. So we packed everything up in the car, and we came home. And when we finally got home, it was bedtime for William, so we unpacked the car, brought everything inside, got William ready for bed, and we were taking everything out, and Kim said, "Where's the blanket?" I don't know. We looked in the backpack, we looked in the car, we looked in the closets, we tore everything apart trying to find the blanket, and we couldn't find the blanket. So we said, I wonder if it's laying on the sidewalk, like William kicked it off from the stroller, or maybe it's on the carriage route, somehow it fell off. So I went back downtown, and I looked for the blanket, retraced all our steps everywhere where the carriage went, and down the blocks on Main Street, on the sidewalks, thinking that this blanket was going to be there with footmarks and tire tracks and who knows what else on it. And I came home with no blanket. The blanket was lost. And when something valuable to us is lost, we give just about anything to find it. And the same thing is true with God. When God is passionate about the things that belong to God, God will do anything to find them. And God is very passionate, for sure, about the things that belong to Him. And I'm not even sure that captures it enough. I mean, God is sold out. God is zealous. God is crazy about the things that belong to Him, including us. Every one of us. And everyone that God has ever created, God is passionate and zealous and crazy about us. And God will do anything when we're lost. Because we do get lost. I mean, sometimes we run away from a relationship with God. Sometimes we are frustrated and we doubt and we wonder, God, where are you? And there's a sense of being lost from God. And truth be told, we're all born lost. I mean, the Bible says, none are righteous, not even one. All of us are just born lost from a relationship with God. And it's only by God's grace that we're able to be found and put back into this relationship with God. And so it really begs the question, what does God do when we're lost? Because everyone's lost at some point or another. So what is it that God does when we are lost? Well, it just so happens that Jesus was in that conversation with some people. And here's how it started. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to Jesus to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. I mean, they were complaining that Jesus was spending time with sinful people. And Jesus could not let that go unnoticed. Because that was one of the most fundamental, if not the most fundamental pieces of who God was and what it means to be in a relationship with God. So Jesus is hearing that they're complaining that God, in the form of Jesus, is spending time with sinful people. And in their minds, these religious leaders, they're thinking, no, it's black and white. God is good and God can spend time with good people. God is not sinful, and so God cannot spend time with sinful people. And they couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that Jesus was bridging this divide and that that was okay. So Jesus decides he has to address this. And so what does Jesus do? What has Jesus done for the last 10 weeks that we've looked at all kinds of things? He tells a story. We've been looking at these epic stories that Jesus tells. We also call them parables. And these are these things that Jesus does when he really wants to get across the most basic point. I mean, if we look in the Gospels and we see when Jesus happens to tell a story, and there are not many of them, when he happens to tell a story, it's a signal to us to say, take a break, slow down, and really read this. Because this is when Jesus is really teaching the most important stuff. This is the 10th epic story that we've looked at. And this is the last epic story that we're going to look at. There are several more, but this is the last one that we're going to look at. And this might be, although I think I say this every time, this might be the most important thing that Jesus has ever taught in the whole Bible. But it is, because it grounds us in who God is, what God is all about, and it's one of these most basic things that Jesus has ever taught and Jesus has ever said. This epic story is perhaps the most popular and well told. The Good Samaritan, I think, maybe rivals a second, but this one might be the most popular and most ever told story, the Prodigal Son. And it's all about what God does when we're lost. So the Prodigal Son, though, is not by itself. It comes in a trio of stories. So there's actually 3 stories that Jesus tells right in a row, and the Prodigal is the third. It's kind of like reading a 3-chapter book. You can't just skip to the 3rd chapter. You've got to at least skim the first 2 chapters to get what's happening in the 3rd chapter. So let's skim real quick. The first story is about a sheep herder who has a flock of 100 sheep. And one of those sheep goes missing. And so Jesus poses the question, will the shepherd leave the 99 sheep to go look for the one sheep that is lost? And once he finds it, will he then invite all of his friends to celebrate after he does? And of course everybody's thinking, well, duh, of course he's going to leave the 99 sheep to go find the one sheep because the sheep belongs to him. And absolutely he's going to go celebrate with everything he's got when he finds that sheep. Second story. There's a woman who has some cash lying around. Some significant amount of cash. And she loses some of it. She misplaces the amount that would be like a day's wage to us. If we earned an entire day's wage, that's how much she lost. She misplaces it. And so she sweeps her whole house. She turns on the lights. She's looking for this. And Jesus poses the question, will you not look for this? And will you not celebrate once you find it? And again, people are like, well, of course you're going to look for it. Of course you're going to find it. It's your hard-earned money. You wouldn't just let it go to waste. Yes, you're going to look for it. And yes, you're going to celebrate once you do find it. And then the third story. It's in your bulletin or it's up on the screen. Settle in. It's a longer one, but it's a good one, right? To illustrate this point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide the wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed up all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his field to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.' So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to his father, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son.' But his father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found.' So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. 'Your brother's back,' he was told, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return.' The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, 'All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you've told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet, when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf.' His father said to him, 'Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found.' There's a table just outside the doors over here. And every August, that table is empty. And over the course of the school year, that table gets more and more full of stuff. There's jackets, there's water bottles, there's even library books, there's backpacks, there's shoes, there's sandals, there's all kinds of stuff that just builds up into this big pile on the table. And it's the lost and found for the school. And every year, announcements go to the students to say, look for your stuff, look for your things. They're all over here, and they belong to you guys. Look for them and take them home. And notices go home to the parents and the families to say, look for your kids' stuff, because it's over there on the table. And every year, there's still a pile there, and it gets donated to some people who need it apparently more than some of the kids do. If the parents don't feel and the kids don't feel like it really belongs to them and they're passionate about it, it's going to go lost. And God never lets that happen. God doesn't let those kinds of things happen, especially when it comes to what's most valuable to God. And what's most valuable to God is us. I mean, the Bible says that each one of us, all of us, are created with the image of God. We walk around bearing somehow the image of God. We reflect the image of God. And though sometimes we don't always act like it, or we don't speak like it, or we don't look like it, we do bear the image of God in us, every one of us. It's like having a tag in the collar of our clothes or sewn into the seam of our clothes somewhere that says where we're made. And ours would say something like made in the image of God. Because we are the most valuable and the thing that God is the most passionate about. And God is passionate about the things that belong to God. When Jesus tells these stories, he's ramping up to the third one. Because the first one's about sheep. And sheep are important, but they're only so important. And money is important, but it's only so important, and he's ramping up to the people, because what's most important out of all those is people. And who wouldn't go out and search for a lost sheep? Well, of course. And who wouldn't go go out and search for lost money. Of course we would. But who wouldn't go out and search for a lost person, a lost child, somebody who belongs in our family? And if Jesus is saying anything about this core truth of God, he's saying God never lets the lost stay lost. God never lets the lost stay lost. When you and I are lost, God doesn't let us stay there. When people we know who are dreadfully lost are lost, God doesn't let them stay there. God doesn't want them to stay there. God is passionate that we never stay lost. There are several people in particular who I have prayed for a long time. Not a lot of people, just a few people. Some of them I've prayed for decades, that they would find God in some sort of an obvious way. Several of them have not yet found God. And I know some of you have been praying for people for this same kind of duration for a long time. And it seems like the lost are staying lost. But the hope that I get when I read this parable is that that's not the case. God, when he's passionate and zealous and driven and crazy about the people that belong to him, he doesn't let those lost ever stay lost. Every one of our lives, I think, is probably a story about this too. Every one of us has some sort of a story to tell about being found. Some of us, for sure, are more dramatic than others. Some of us, we could tell the story from a stage and get a rousing applause, and others, we might say it and people might go, oh, that's neat. But we all have a story to tell about being lost and then being found. And every one of these stories is evidence that God doesn't let the lost stay lost. This guy that we're going to celebrate on Thursday, named Patrick, he had an interesting life. He was born in England in the 400s, and when he was 16 years old, he was captured by Irish pirates, and he was taken from his hometown, wherever it was in England, to Ireland. And he was held there as a slave for 6 years. He worked caring for animals, he worked on the farm, and during that time he was there, he even says that he had lots of time to pray. And during that time, he came into more of an understanding of who God was. He understood something before, but now he really understood a lot more of who God was. And after this period of 6 years or so that he was caring for these animals and he was enslaved, he heard God tell him, your ship is ready to take you home. So he escaped from his captor, and he went to the coast, and he made a treacherous journey with some other people back to his hometown. And when he eventually got there, Patrick dedicated his life to training and learning to go into religious ministry. And so he became a priest, or whatever they exactly called it, in that place at that time. And when he was trying to figure out what to do and where to serve, he heard God gave him a vision. And the vision was people in Ireland handing him a letter that said, come to us. So what does he do? He goes to Ireland and he serves the people, and now he's the patron saint of Ireland, and he's credited with being the first person who's taken the gospel of Christ to Ireland. To him, were the Irish people lost? Well, they were more than lost. I mean, they were like evil because they captured him. But they were so severely lost. And God used Patrick to not let the lost stay lost. And God uses every follower of Christ, and God uses the church so that that can happen. That's part of our role. That's part of our job, to not let anybody who's lost in any sort of a capacity or any sort of a way stay that way. God doesn't let us stay there. When we lost William's blanket, we felt awful. We felt like we had disgraced a gift that somebody had given us, that we'd been careless with our family. And you got to know something about the Schaefer home and the Schaefer family. We don't lose things. Like a cardinal rule in our house is that you care for everything that you have, and you keep track of it all the time, and don't you dare lose anything. So we're beating ourselves up over this blanket for a long time, and we felt horrible. And so Kim says, well, there's only one thing we can do. We gotta remake it. So she searched long and hard to find the pieces of fabric and to find the right shapes and to figure out exactly how this thing went together and to ask, how was it sewn and how did it happen, to the point where we finally made the blanket. And William had his blanket again. This is what God does. God remakes lost people. That's the kind of power that God has. So if you're praying for somebody who you sense is lost, oh, God can do some amazing things, no doubt. If you've been praying for 20 years for somebody, God can still remake them. If you feel like you're lost right now, no doubt, God can remake every one of us. This is the kind of power that God has. And if we get this, we understand what a relationship with God is like. Would you pray with me?